Hey, everybody. Welcome to my podcast. I'm here with Autumn Raviscioni, and she's a local lady here in Batesville, Arkansas, who runs a ministry called Our Father's Table. And the way I understand it, it's food and clothing distribution that she does on a periodic schedule. She has supporters and sponsors that help her do that. And then I know she gives her time, her life to that ministry. And so, Autumn, welcome to the podcast. It's great having you. We call this playlist "Real Talk." So, I just want to encourage you to be real. Tell it like it is. Tell it how you see it, and
Okay,
let the
great.
people blow it up in the comment section. Whatever they want to say, they can say it, and we'll just have a nice open conversation about things. I want to start though with your Christian testimony. As a
Awesome.
believer in Jesus Christ, I want you to kind of give me the maybe your pre-Christian, a little bit about your pre-Christian life and how you came to know the Lord.
Okay, I was basically I like to I believe it's really important that everybody have a 2 or 3 sentence testimony that they're really comfortable with and have practiced a lot, that they can just throw out there like bait and then see if they get some nibbles. And so mine
Yeah.
starts like this. Mine is I asked Jesus into my heart when I was 8 years old, but I didn't give him my heart till I was 38 years old. And I'm really glad that he pursued me in my sin for more than 30 years. And
Mhm.
so if I throw that out there, then if someone says, oh, yeah, well, what was that like or something, then I know I got a nibble and I can keep going. If they just go, oh, yeah, that's good, and go on about their way, then I
Mhm.
know that that one's not ready to receive yet. And so that's kind of how I like to start most anytime I give a little talk, just saying what my 2 or 3 sentence testimony is and then expounding from there. And so basically, um, here locally, I my grandparents were members of Calvary Baptist, and I was baptized there. I was saved there and accepted Jesus into my heart during Vacation Bible School when I was 8 years old, and I was baptized there. We moved to Newark. My mom was a school teacher, and my dad was a truck driver, and in that industry a lot. And so I was a graduate of Newark Kangaroos. I'm a kangaroo all the way. And
Yeah.
so then we were heavily involved in church there, my mom and my siblings, and I was really active in my youth group. And on weekends, I was doing exactly what I wanted to. So I did the
Mhm.
things that I thought everybody else thought was important, so that way they wouldn't question anything that I was doing. And then I would just be um, deceptive. Basically, I was leading 2 different lives. I was doing different life on the weekends than I was during the week with my family and at church. And unfortunately that continued even after I graduated. I ended up working at White Rogers for several years, and I worked in the back with all the guys, and I had a bad mouth and horrible language, and I was a bit rough and tumble like they were as well. And so God definitely knew what I was running from, and he sent a lady there who was only 2 women in the whole department on my shift, and she was the other one. And she was from the Theta Assembly of God. Her name is Ginger Carroll, and she continually put the Lord in front of me and those guys. And so she just loved on me and kept planting the word, and I could definitely see from hindsight that God had sent her to continually try and call me back. And so um, I I didn't 100% commit then, and eventually I ended up quitting and going to college over at Arkansas Tech for a wildlife biology degree. And I was older then. I was a non-traditional student, still in my late 20s, but I was still a bit wild and doing my own thing. And from there, I took a job as a zookeeper and a conservation educationalist and moved around a lot, and I didn't even have a Bible with me during those years. And now I look back on it and it makes me very mournful that I didn't even have one with me. But when I was finally in Fort Worth after about 6 years, I started working part-time because zookeepers are basically manual labor with a college degree, and it doesn't pay very much. And I was living in Fort Worth, and Fort Worth is an expensive city to live in for a zookeeper's salary. So I started taking a part-time job at a local Curves gym, and there a woman invited me to breakfast, and her treat. I was pretty poor still, and or in my mind, and I went with her to lunch, and she invited me to church, and I made the excuse that I work on Sundays. And finally, she invited me out again and just kept pouring Jesus into me and kept inviting me to church. And you know how God works. As soon as you start making excuses, he paves the way. And so all of a sudden my schedule changed, and I wasn't working on Sundays anymore, and I didn't have an excuse. And so I accepted her invitation, and I went to church with her. And when I got there, I found out she was the pastor's wife. And I didn't know that before. And she knew that I was by myself and that I was away from the Lord and that I was struggling financially. And so she just kept taking me to breakfast until I decided to come to church with her. And so they gave me a Bible, and that's the Bible that I still use today, one of the Bibles that I use today. And so her name was Faith, and I'm just really grateful to God for continually placing people in my life to call me back to him. From Fort Worth, I did move back home. My grandmother was terminal, and we had been very close, and she lived on College Heights. And so I moved home and took a job that served local school districts, and we had a partnership with UACCB for me to have offices there. I worked on a federal TRIO grant. And so I was there on campus for 15 years and in the local school districts, and God allowed me to take care of her for 2 years before she passed. And so I got those years, and I was really grateful. That's one of the things that I feel like sometimes God just kind of pulls back the curtain a little and lets you see, and that he was the one that allowed it or placed it or helped you get there. And so my grandmother's funeral was exactly 2 years to the day that I moved home. Exactly. And so I was so grateful that he allowed me to have that time with her, and that also got me back home. And so during that time, my brother ended up, after she passed, my brother ended up having a wreck, and it was nearly fatal. And he was 25, so I was 35, and he's my youngest sibling. And then he was airlifted to the Memphis Trauma Center, and I had been going back to church a little with my mom, but I was still 1 foot in and 1 foot out and wasn't really committed. And so on the way, I remember sitting in the back seat of my dad and my stepmom's vehicle on the way to Memphis Trauma Center after they had airlifted him. And I just remember this conversation with God saying, I know you've been here the whole time, and I know I've been hard-headed and selfish and doing my own thing, and I have thought that I have been in control this whole time, and I know that I haven't been. And one way or the other, whether he lives or whether he dies, I know that I need to come back to you, and I need to be closer to you. And so I'm just asking that you help me navigate what that would look like being all in again. And so he had 8 surgeries in 8 days, and basically the equivalent of 3 full body blood transfusions. It was another, he was there for 2 weeks. It was another 3 months before he could walk. And we had to take shifts at the house taking care of him and helping him. He couldn't do anything on his own at the beginning. And I had just started this brand new job and a brand new avenue in education, and I had just been doing conservation education, but not for real all the way education. And I hadn't been on that job very long at all, and my boss allowed me to work from my mom's house for about 4 hours a day those first 3 months until my brother-in-law could get there to relieve me, and I could go to my office or go to one of my schools or something like that to do work. So God was definitely helping us through all of that. And today he has 2 children. So we weren't sure if he would be able to have children after that. And so he has 2 children and a lovely family. And we are just tickled that he helped us through that. And I was as good as my word. I started going all the time back to church after that. And in the summer of 2011, I was living by my house self in a little rent house in Rosie. And I was in my mid to late 30s. I didn't cook. I just microwaved because it was just me. And I remember I was reading my Bible on a Sunday afternoon, and I really just felt it drop into my heart. You need to feed people. And it was almost so, I don't want to say loud because it wasn't spoken, but it was almost so loud that I actually turned around and I said, "Are you talking to me? Because I don't cook. I don't know what you're talking about." And and so I just kept reading, and I thought that was a little weird. And he just kept on me, and so every Sunday he met me right there in my chair, and eventually I started fasting on Sundays. And then it started becoming urgent. And then I was driving around looking for buildings, and I didn't have any money. I had no idea what I was doing. And I would tell him that. I was like, "Okay, I feel you, but I don't know what you want me to do for real. Like, what's the first step?" Because I'm driving around here going, "Okay, God wants me to do this, but I don't even really know what that looks like." And so, and I was a part of a women's Wednesday night ministry and a prayer group and a Bible study. And I told them about it. And I asked them in the summer of 2011 to start praying with me about it. And they started praying, and I was asking every week. And then in fall, it was starting to get super urgent. And I was just almost demanding that they didn't quit praying because I was just feeling this sense of urgency, and I couldn't do anything about it, and I didn't know exactly. And by now I'm fasting TV too, and I'm just really focused and trying to get the answers I need and what it is exactly that he wants me to do. And finally, in January of 2012, there was an article that came out in the Batesville Daily Guard, and it talked about the number of homeless people that we had living on West Side, and they estimated it to be about 100 at that time. And I didn't see the article. And a friend of mine from that Bible study group called me a couple of weeks later and said, "There is a church on West Side, a lady from a church on West Side that got together a bunch of food and went under the bridge to try to feed some people. And she made enough food for 50, and they couldn't find anybody." And and so they went back up on Central and went to the dollar store and made some free food signs out of poster board and had their kids stand on the side of the road. And they said that the food for 50 was gone in 45 minutes. And they didn't think they met a homeless person, but they heard story after story about not enough groceries to last to the end of the month. And they also met a lot of single parents, a lot of grandparents raising children, and just a lot of elderly that didn't have enough food or money to last to the end of the month. And so they told me about it, and they said, "I think that this is what we've been praying for, and this is this woman's number, and I need you to call her." And so I did. And the next Saturday, which next week will be 14 years since then.
Wow.
And yeah. The next week, I showed up over there. I called her, and I showed up over there, and I helped serve and brought the food. And I brought my little sisters in Big Brother, Big Sister program, and my young nieces with me. And I just really felt like I was where I was supposed to be. And so at that time, they were trying to get different groups together to help do that every week. And I signed up for the third Saturday of the month. And me and my littles in my family just kept going on the third Saturday. And a lot of the school groups got involved. I believe the Spanish club and maybe the Beta club and some more. And they were taking weekends as well. And so finally in May, school let out. And at that time, then they stopped coming because the groups weren't meeting for the summer. And my mom, even sweet, she said, "You did the very best you could. I'm so proud of you." But in my heart, I felt that God was saying, "Are you going to do what I asked you to do?" And I said, "Yes, Lord, I'll do what you asked me." And so I just took a card table and 30 sandwiches and 30 bottles of water and went and set out and started. At that point, then we found the old boarded up Fina station, the Quick Mart, and on Central in front of the bowling alley. And we started setting up underneath that overhang. The overhang provided shelter from wind and rain and even heat. And so we made that our regular Saturday hangout. And the reason we found it is because a lot of local people would have garage sales there, and we'd pull up and we would say, "Who owns this? And who do you get permission from?" And they say, "We don't know, but nobody uses it. So we just set up garage sales here." So we followed in the same suit, and we started showing up on Saturdays. And it got to the point to where the people who were coming to eat would tell the garage sale people that they couldn't set up there because we were going to be there to feed them later at 11. So people would do garage sales early, and then they would start packing up around 10 or so. Or they would just set up beside where we set up, and they would just run it on the side of the parking lot instead of under the overhang. And so the people in town that were benefiting from our program were securing a spot for us. And so finally, it was pretty cool. So we just kept starting, and in August of that year, a maintenance man at UACCB invited me to come speak at his church. He had been discipling me in my office, and he invited me to come speak at church. And he said, it was kind of funny. He said, "We are KJV, so all your scriptures will need to be out of there." And I said, "Okay." And then he said, "We don't mind at all what you wear when you're sitting in the congregation, but since you will be on the stage, you will need to wear a skirt, and it will need to be long because the stage is elevated." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And he goes, "So during your sermon," and I went, "Wait, what? A sermon? What?" And he was like, "Yeah, you're the speaker. You're it. Nobody else, just you." So, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And so that was the first time I was just kind of pushed into the front of preaching, or at least sharing. And so I did that, and they decided they would be the first church to come alongside us, and they gave me a love offering. They took up a love offering, and they gave me a folding table, a really long folding table, and a brand new cooler. And I thought I was in hog heaven. And then they decided that they would take the first Saturday of the month, and they started coming. And actually on that night, I met what was to be my future husband on that night that I went to speak at that church. And they started coming on the first Saturday. And after a while, he started coming on other Saturdays with me. And he asked me out pretty early on. And I said, "I'm still really new at this all in, yes, on the table thing with God. And Jesus is my boyfriend at the moment. And I really am not looking to have a relationship until I get this one at least, under my feet. And I feel like I'm pretty firm at least." And he said, "Okay," even though you could tell he wasn't happy about the answer. And then he just kept coming every Saturday. And I was not at all interested in that. So I said, here's still worldly thinking. I said, if you're going to be here every Saturday, then you take the first and the third, and I'll take the second and the fourth. And that way we don't have to work every Saturday. And he was very disappointed with that because he was coming to see me. And so,
Yeah.
or at least that was the motivating factor to continue.
Right.
The ministry just grew, and other churches started coming on board, and they were taking Saturdays. And so I started assigning some of the food stuff. We added a hot item like hot soup or hot beans or hot anything, as long as it would fit in a styrofoam cup and would be nutritious. And so these days we serve in the brown bag on Saturdays. We serve a cup of soup, a sandwich, a bottle of water, a snack, either chips or fruit, and a track about Jesus in the bag. Back then we were doing 30 to 50, and these days I think in the 360s is the most we've ever done in 2 hours. And the
Wow.
average for the average for almost all Saturdays is around 267. Somewhere in there is the average of what we feed every week. And then after Steve and I started doing that, he kept talking about a soup kitchen. And to be real honest with you, at that time, I thought, I'm doing what I was called to do. There's no reason for me to do else. And
Yeah.
I was
Not
still
having anything
learning.
here.
And yeah, I was still learning and still pretty green. And I was like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't have to do more. And then the Lord brought a member of the Bethel AME Church to my office at UACCB. He hunted me down there. I never met him. He didn't know me. And he came in and sat down in my office and asked me what I thought our next steps were. And I'm sure it was the Lord and Steve's pressuring, but the first thing popped out of my mouth was, I don't know, I guess a soup kitchen, like that. And he said, well, we have a fellowship hall that we are not currently using, and we would like to offer it to you to run a soup kitchen in there. And yeah, and I was like, wow, okay. And so the very first day that we showed up was on a Thursday. We decided to have a meal on a Thursday because that's what was easiest for us. And we got it all ready, and we advertised it in the Saturday table bags, and not one person came, none. And we had made food and there was nothing. And I try to tell people a lot. I use this story as perseverance and persistence, because if I already thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing and I didn't really need to do anything else, and God was pushing me to do more, and I attempted it and it didn't work, then that would have been an easy excuse just to quit and go, yeah, they don't really need that. They didn't come, whatever. But somebody else came and said, no, there's already a place that feeds on Thursday nights in town, and they're all over there. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I started researching to see. And so Monday and Tuesday nights were free. So we took that, and then we got going and started. And I call those 3 years where we learned what not to do in a hunger ministry, or a soup kitchen. And so because that one was run through a church, it was more like a potluck in the eyes of the city. And so because we were in a church, and but as soon as we have to move out of a church, we do need to be certified by the health department. And so we stayed there for 3 years and figured out what we were doing and got our feet under us and got a volunteer base built up. And I just can't tell you enough times how many times the cooks would say, I don't think we have enough food tonight. And I'd go, just pray. It'll be fine. Just pray. And as I was leaving work, someone would call and say, hey, we had a meeting today and we have a lot of barbecue meals left over. And guess what? We're serving barbecue at the kitchen tonight. And then that happened many, many times more. It happened so many times that you absolutely 1,000,000% could not deny that it was God. And so just consistently over and over with different kinds of food. And it would exactly match what we were feeding that night that others didn't think we had enough of. in that same regard, they also wanted to hoard quite a bit. If we had anything left over, they wanted to freeze it. I was like, no, give it away. And they're like, we don't have a lot. And I was like, yes, but if we hold things in our hands, it's not empty to receive what God is bringing. I said, so give that old stuff away. We've already cooked it, and we will be waiting and praying for God to bring more. And it always happened. And so the testimony for that, and I hope you're ready to have your hair blown back. We served 300 people a week on $150 a month. I'm just going to let that sit.
Yeah.
And the majority of our donations at that time were scratch and dent food items, and that we picked up or whatever. And the money used mainly went for all the paper products and things like that. So almost all the food was free, but it was all dented cans, and we had it all piled up, and they would fall over, and it was pretty wild. And so the AME churches are run a different way, and they could possibly have a new pastor every year. And we were there for 3 years, and they had a pastor each year, a different pastor each year that we were there. And every time a change happened, they invited us to a little meeting after their church service on Sunday. And so this was the third time that it was happening. And by this point, Steve and I have been friends for at least 6 years. And we know every bad thing that could be known about each other. And we know whether or not that's something we could tolerate. And we had just gotten engaged to be married. We started dating with purpose to be married. And then we show up to this meeting for the new pastor. And I thought, let's just really blow this guy's socks off. Let's just invite all the volunteers to this meeting, so that way he sees that how supportive we are and how grateful we are and all this and all that. And we get there, and we've been to 2 others before, but just 2 or 3 of us, me and Steve and maybe 1 other. And we get there, and there's like 12 volunteers have showed up to this meeting after church, and they're all kind of looking around like, what are they all doing here? The meeting was about us. They were telling us that they were about to start using their fellowship hall again, and they wanted and they were giving us 3 months. They were gracious and gave us 3 months to let us know that they were wanting us to move on. They were going to be using their fellowship hall. And we said, I was shocked, and everybody else was shocked. And I think they were wondering if I knew that, and I didn't. So I just really quickly stood up and just told them how much we appreciated them opening their doors to us and offering us the opportunity to grow and expand and learn, and that we would 100% leave it in 10 times better shape than we found it in, and it would be ready to go for whatever they needed it for. And so we walked out of the church. The fellowship hall is pulled apart from the regular. It's not connected to the church, even though it's right beside it. And so a standalone building. And we all left the church and walked inside of the fellowship hall where we serve. And we all held hands and prayed about the future of our Father's table and what we would and what would happen. And I held it together as the strong leader I'm supposed to be. And we got in the car, and Steve's driving, and we pulled right around the corner, and I just broke down and started crying. And Steve's like, oh, honey, don't, and he's patting me, and he's trying to calm me, and he's driving, and he's like, oh, honey, I know that it's upsetting, but I really think, don't you really see God's hand in this? And I was like, I guess I don't. You're going to have to tell me. And he said, honey, they're asking us to leave 3 weeks before our wedding. He said, I'm pretty sure that's God's grace. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said, I think that's going to give us time to learn how to be married and become one, and to operate as a unit instead of as 2 individuals. And I was like, okay, I'm trying to see it that way. And so in Deuteronomy 24 5, I don't know the exact verse, it says that a man who takes a new bride shall not go to war or start any new business for at least 1 year, but stay home and make his wife cheerful. And so it was not surprising. We already had begun talking with the Independence Baptist Association about using their building, because we knew the whole time we needed to be on West Side where our Saturday outreach was located. And Bethel was not very far from West Side, but it just wasn't in West Side where we knew we needed to be anyway. And we had already started talking with them, and they had allowed us to use their back room, which is long, to keep our storage stuff for the Saturday table. And so not surprisingly, it took a little more than a year to end up getting a kitchen together. So Steve and I were a whole year without anything extra on us, but just our regular jobs, and just time to grow in marriage. And this was my first marriage, and this was his first marriage wholeheartedly and for God. And so neither of us had had godly relationships in the past, and I hadn't been in any relationship since I had on the table. And so we knew when we started dating with purpose that if we didn't do it God's way, that it was going to end up breaking up the ministry. It was going to end up, we just wouldn't be successful in it if we didn't do it God's way. And so early on, we set a lot of boundaries. And so he had a curfew. We never sat on a couch together by ourselves. We sat at the kitchen table every time he came over and just played backgammon. He taught me to play backgammon, and so we played backgammon at the kitchen table. When we went out to other places, we tried always to have couples and things like that. He laughed. He was 60 when we got married, and I was 45. And he laughed that he was 60 years old and had a curfew that he had to go home. And anyway, though, I think we were a little haughty about it at the beginning, and joking about it and making light of it a little too much. And later on, I saw the error of that, and I repented for it. We both did. But the closer we got to the actual marriage, we were just so humbled, and we were like, we're really going to make it. We're really going to do this God's way, and we're really not going to give in to temptation. And just the closer that we got to the wedding, the more humble and the more just grateful that we were that God allowed us to be strong and helped us to put those boundaries in place. And so we got married 6 months to the day of our first kiss. And so, yeah, that was so, I mean, if you're going to do it God's way, you don't need to drag it out, right? Because that just leads to more temptation. And we already had been friends and running ministry together for 6 years. And so, I was pretty terrified, to be truthful. I had, my relationships before had not been, even if they had been significant, they wouldn't have been what I would call serious. And so, not with long-term purpose ever. And so I didn't know if I was going to be any good at it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to be submissive, to be truthful. I was still struggling with that with God. And so, I mean, I was doing what he asked me, but not very quickly, and not without a lot of fuss and wrestling with him about it. And so I had not got to that point of obedience yet that I could distinctly hear his voice and try hard to put myself aside and just act on it, and with blind faith. And so basically I just was grateful that God just allowed us. It affords more trust than you would ever be able to know, when two people are willing to do it God's way and wait for marriage. And so I really feel called that I have to share that part of my testimony a lot, because that's one of the things that the world struggles with, is our flesh the most. And so in many different areas, but especially with sexual sin. And so I try to tell people that I didn't know until I experienced it for myself, but the gift of the Holy Spirit in your marriage bed is a gift that you want for yourself, but it's also a gift that you want to give to your spouse as well. And I didn't know those things until after I'd been through it and experienced it myself. And so it's just a completely different thing. And I think it saddens me that a lot of people don't ever experience that, so that they don't ever see the significance of waiting for matrimony before they are sexually active and they had multiple partners, and they don't just commit to one person, because that is by design how it is made for us to thrive and for us to be closer to him and consecrated for him. And so I am just that is a really big part of my testimony that I didn't experience until Steve. And so basically about 3 months into marriage, Steve said, "Wow, you're really a lot more submissive than I thought you'd be." I said, "Yeah, I know, me too, right?" I really see that it was God growing me to be more submissive to him by making me submissive to Steve. And I would have girlfriends that knew me as a very strong, independent woman, which was actually one of the biggest lies the devil ever told me. It convinced me of, was that I was a strong, independent woman that didn't need anybody or anything else. I could do it all myself. That was the biggest lie I ever believed, and that I operated in for decades. And so, I thought that was freedom, but I really didn't experience true freedom until I was on the other side of submission. That's where true freedom lies, is on the other side of submission. And many people don't get there. And I pray that everybody that I touch can get there. So I want to make heaven crowded. So, and so, so basically, after I started the Saturday table, and before Steve and I ever got together, even met, I started attending the Compass Church. I felt like God moved me there because they are very centered on missions, and they are very much a sending church. And I really felt that God was pricking my heart for missions. And so as a single person, even with a full-time professional job, I didn't have money for things like over international travel or anything like that. But through Compass, I have been able to be a part of some longer, not they're short-term mission trips, but to Toronto, and I went to Nepal. I was about 80 pounds heavier than I am now, and I'm still a little chunk at the moment, but the Lord is faithful. I hiked 7 hours up a Himalayan mountain, 80 pounds heavier than I am now. And so if he wants you to go, he will make the way, and he will push you up that mountain to witness to people. So I think that's, so don't ever count yourself out because of any reason, physical, mental, whatever it is. He can use you. So, and he can use you even in the areas where you're the weakest. So I also had the awesome privilege of doing a backyard Bible study in Southside at the Fairchild Mobile Home Park. And that one was just as important and just as impactful to me as hiking a Himalayan mountain. And so, and standing and praying at the Chinese border, those little kids and those people, their parents that came for the dinner at the end, that was very special. And that was a very awesome week that I had doing that backyard Bible study as well. And then the last year, and now again this year, I'll be going to Puerto Rico. I went with the church, but we're partnering with an organization called Sin Relief, and we have Sin Relief in Arkansas and Memphis, and it's all over. And so we basically put on on roofs and painted. And these people, many of them still have not gotten relief from 2017 Hurricane Helena, I think it was, whatever the 2017 hurricane was that wiped out a whole lot of Puerto Rico. Many of them still are dealing with patched roofs. And I mean, it's been almost 10 years. I mean, it's 2026 now. And so I'm going again, and we leave on Valentine's Day. And that couldn't be the best present that I could get for Valentine's Day, was getting to leave and go back. And I've been studying Duolingo so I could get my Spanish skills up. And so I am, we actually, both of the families that we interacted with, we split up, and they have teams come every week, and our team split up and went to 2 different houses, and we worked on a house for 2 or 3 days, and then we moved to another one and worked for 2 or 3 days. And then we had other projects on different days. And so both of the families that we were a part of and witnessed to and helped in their house, they both came to know the Lord, and we were able to share and witness through our translator and even through us. And one guy didn't know a lick of Spanish, but he memorized the whole 3 circles track in Spanish, so he could just do, and he really didn't even know what some of the words were, but he just memorized the whole track so he could just say the whole track. And so I thought that was pretty awesome. And so basically the Lord has just been so good to us that we have then, the biggest mission trip of my life is our Father's Table. And just since that May of 2012, when God said, "Are you going to be all in?" And I put my yes on the table. And on my way home that day in 2012, my mom said, "So how did it go?" And I said, "I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing for the very first time in my life." And so that's when I knew I was where I needed to be, and that was my calling. And a lot of people struggle many years to figure out what their calling is. And so I was pretty grateful that the Lord showed he had to show me mine to get me to come back. You know what I mean? He had to say, "Look, I really have a purpose for you, and I really have something I need you to do, but you have to trust me, and you have to be all in." And so 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind." And so I just want to encourage people, even if it sounds like something really silly or something that you don't want to do, then just trust God and step out on faith and do it. And he will definitely reward you, but he will also grow your faith, and he will also show you exactly what it is that he wants from you, and your life will be forever changed to operate in your calling. It's a different thing. So one thing that I was scared to do was in February of 2021, Steve came to me one morning before work, and he said, we had found out a local bank owned this property here where 12 Baskets building is now, and it was just the boarded up FINA station then. And he said, "I want you to call the bank and offer this much money." And it was a real low ball number. And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And he was like, "Oh, come on, why not?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want us to just be seen as an organization that's asking for handouts all the time. I want us to be willing to be a part of Batesville and give back and really help support the community. And that's really low. And I'm the one that's got to deal with the business people. And if I'm just being super honest, my pride doesn't want them to laugh at me. That's the truth. That I don't laugh at me by offering that." And it took him a couple of days, but he finally convinced me. And instead of going, I just called, and they did laugh at me. And they did say, "We've turned down offers for more." And they did say, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And every month he made me call back and talk to him again and offer something else and talk about tax IDs and tax write-offs and 501c3s and how could we possibly get this done. And probably June or July, my home church in Newark invited me and Steve to come talk, and it was already COVID then, and we weren't supposed to hug or be close to each other. We had masks, and we were wearing masks, and we went and visited and spoke there. And one of the deacons that had been a deacon when I was there as well, you could just tell he was so on fire. And he was asked to pray over us at the end, and you could just hear the Holy Spirit in his prayer. He was so pumped up. And at the end, we were standing at the back to greet people, and he ran right up and hugged us. And then he went, "Oh, wait, sorry, I'm not supposed to do that." And because it was COVID, and he backed up, and we just talked, and he was so smiley. And that week went along like every other week. And Steve called me on Friday at work and said, "I got off work early, can I come get you and, go do something?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll have to work late, but I can leave for a little while." And he's like, "Okay." And so I went and got ready in the bathroom and spruced my hair up and thought he was probably going to take me to lunch, kind of like a date. And I get in the car and I'm like, "Okay, where are we going?" He goes, "To the bank." And I was like, and so we walked into the bank Friday after lunch. The guy who I've been dealing with, his office is dark. All the offices are dark except for one at the very end on the complete opposite side of the bank, one light for the offices. So we start walking down there just to tell them what we're there for and to tell the guy that we came by. And lo and behold, in that office was that deacon that prayed over us on Sunday. And this is on Friday. And he is the one there. And we walk in and we tell him what we're there for and what we've offered. And he basically just says that building is not doing us any good. And that's not my department. I'm not over that, but I will make for sure that it is brought up again at our senior meeting on Monday, at our senior staff meeting, and that we'll present it again and see if there's a possibility. So this is in July. In August, Steve and I got COVID. September 1, he ended up having to go to the hospital. That whole month was a rigmarole in and out of the hospital with quarantine and ICU. And he finally passed away on October the 2nd. And he was from California. So we waited until Friday. He died on a Saturday, the first Saturday of October. And then we had the memorial service on Friday, and 4 days later, on the 12th of October, 10 days after he passed, the bank called and accepted the offer. So 4 days into the lowest point in my entire life, the darkest hours that I'd probably ever experienced, 4 days into that, and the Lord said, "I'm not done. I'm giving you time. We're going to heal, but we still got more to do. And this ministry is not done, and I still need you to lead it." And so even though God is just very faithful to even give you light in your own personal darkness, even when you know him, we're still going to experience darkness. We're still going to have troubles in this life, but God will shine light into those circumstances, and he will use it for good. And so basically the scripture that we really adopted for the kitchen is 1 Timothy 6:18, and it says, "Instruct them to be rich in good works, to do good, to be willing to distribute, and ready to communicate." That is the one that we hold strong to. And lots of people say, "Well, there's all kinds of scriptures about feeding. Why didn't you do one like that?" And I was like, everybody really thinks they're good communicators until you set them down with a meal in front of an unmedicated schizophrenic and tell them to witness. And so lots of people are unwilling to communicate, but this scripture tells us we are to be ready to communicate no matter who we're talking to, no matter where we're at, and that we are to encourage people to be rich in good works. And so we have to, that is for the believer, but we have to lead them to that and remind them that good works is a part of their Christian walk and a part of their Christian faith. And good works is not always a clean job. And lots of ministries are, their callings are able to be clean. Medical things have to be clean. God knew that it took people getting up to their elbows in the miry clay to get me out. And so he has allowed me to come back to the miry clay to get down and to help people like he did for me. And so the job is not clean. And I'm around lots of people who cuss, lots of people who are not clean. A few even are unbathed, and they just have all kinds of problems mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, for sure. And for a long time, I was really frustrated because I wasn't seeing anybody come to the Lord. I wasn't seeing anybody's life changed. And I was like, it's been a few years. What am I doing here? Why is this not working? And finally, through that same guy that had been discipling me at UACCB, he said, I voiced that to him, and he said, have you ever thought that maybe your job is not just leading the people in front of the table? And he just stopped and let me think about it. And I was like, I don't really know what you're saying. And he goes, saints need to be taught how to serve. And he's like, that's not something, he said, God gives them that desire, but our flesh fights that. And that is not a natural thing to serve others above yourself. But you have accepted that, and you do that really well for the most part. He said, especially when you're intentional about it. He said, but lots of people are not intentional about it. And even if they come just to serve a sandwich, they don't really understand that they're supposed to be engaging and building a relationship. So one example of building a relationship, and I see we're already about an hour. So, but one thing about building a relationship, I was teaching Steve how to canoe. He had never canoed before. And my sister had a little rent house on the bayou that we could put in and go up the bayou or go down to the river. And so I had a canoe, and I was teaching him how. And we decided we wanted to go on a longer one after he got pretty good at it. So we wanted to go drop one of the cars behind Hogs Exxon there at the bayou and float down to it. And I said, okay. So we went and parked his and left mine sitting there by the takeout. And when we got all the way back there, I realized that I had left the keys to my truck in his truck at Hogs Exxon. And so we were at my truck. No one was home. It was in the afternoon of a work day. And so we just started walking, and we got up on Central, and we were walking right past where we serve here on Saturday. And it just reminded me, and I pulled out my phone and I started making phone calls, and I would leave messages. This is Autumn. Call me if you get a minute. And I'd do another one. And after about the third one, he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just calling some of our Saturday table people to see if we can get a ride. And he said, you have their phone number? And I said, you don't? Like that? Like, why don't you have their phone number if you're here every Saturday? You know what I mean? Finally, a little old lady who just turned 91. Her name is Helen Dewey, and we still serve her today. We called, she answered, and she came down and got us and drove us over to the car, and Steve offered her some gas money, and I thought she was going to hit him. She said, why, Lord, no, we don't want your money. You go, as much as y'all feed us, I can take you over here for nothing. I don't need your money. And so anyway, I think he learned a lesson that day and started gathering phone numbers and making sure that he was building the relationships as well. And so basically what God started out with 30 sandwiches last year in 2025, we served 15,588 hot meals between the soup kitchen, the community kitchen, and the Saturday table street outreach. And so I just think we should never, ever limit God. We should never pray little bitty prayers to our great big God. We should ask for things that seem absolutely 100% impossible, because he says that if we ask it in his name, that he will give it to us. And so I am living proof. This building that I am sitting in doing this podcast with you from is living proof that God will be as good as his word, and he will also just be faithful to fulfill his promise in you and complete the good work that he starts in you. And so I just want to say to everybody listening, something in you, just don't lose faith and just keep going, even when it seems tough, because if the devil's fighting you, that means you're on the right track.
Yeah, Autumn, I want to go back to something you said
Anything
earlier.
else that I haven't? Okay.
If you don't mind, yeah, I
No,
found it
not at
very
all.
interesting that you articulated earlier that you felt like the Lord was literally speaking to you to start
Yeah.
this ministry. And I also have the same kind of testimony with some of the ministries that God's used me to launch and oversee. And it's almost strange, like sometimes in the body of Christ, people have different ideas and they coalesce around different concepts, but for me, I've got to believe in, the Bible that says, my sheep know my voice, the voice of a
Yes.
stranger they will not follow. And then over in
Yes.
Romans, it says if you're led by the Spirit of God, you're children of God. And so, like,
Yes.
it doesn't say the inverse is true, but I think we should maybe throw it out there that if you're not led by the Spirit of God, are you really a child of God? Let's just throw that out there that way. I'm not trying to be Mr. Condemnation, but I am very much pro relationship with Jesus. And I think
Yes.
everything starts, and you said it several times in the time that you've had, everything is really relational. Everything starts with our relationship with God and then our relationships with one another. Life is virtually purposeless if we don't have a relationship with God and a relationship with people. And so I don't know, I've found tremendous satisfaction in the kind of work that you're doing in the ways that I do it. I do it maybe a little differently than you do it, but I find purpose in ministry. It makes my life meaningful. And I actually, I love the work that I do. There've been times, over my lifetime when I haven't just been woo, just loving it, but for the most part,
Yes.
I've been loving it. I've been thankful and grateful to God for his hand upon my life and the things he's got me doing. And so I'm really delighted to hear your story, and just kind of like to close it out. How can people get a hold of you? How do people get to know you better, maybe, or how do people,
Okay.
they want to partner with your
Well,
ministry to feed the hungry? How do they do that?
one thing that I just want to go ahead and brag on God about is that I have felt like a long time. After Steve passed away, I stepped away from my full-time job and took a part-time job at a local church close to Westside, so that way I could be closer to doing this full-time and only work part-time, because I knew this is what I needed to be doing. And the Lord allowed that. And then it was 2.5 years that I worked there. And just this last week, the Lord has been able to allow our board to pay me part-time what I was making part-time working somewhere else. So now, as of last week, God is really awesome to fulfill his promise. I actually have no other job but our Father's table as of just this week. And so I so far with the 20 hours, they are wanting me to focus on the excuse me, hunger part of the ministry, since that is our major spot. So my hours right now are Monday and Tuesday noon to 8 p.m. because we start cooking at 3:30. We don't get finished cleaning till after 7, and then I come across the street and do the laundry and things like that, or let people into a shower. This building has a shower as well that we allow for homeless and disabled. It's an ADA shower. But basically, My phone number is on our Facebook page. We are currently working on a website. We do have a domain. We just don't have a host and don't have it set up yet. And it will be oftbatesville.org. So look for that coming soon. Hopefully, I'm hoping this month, if not, but very soon. And then my email is oftbatesville@gmail.com to go along with that website. And then my phone number is on our Facebook page. And so we are, and I can give you that if anybody wants it. It doesn't matter to me, 870-834-9845. We do have a volunteer coordinator for the community kitchen. Her name is Natalie Floyd. And I will send that number as well, or I might could just look it up real quick. And we definitely need cooks. The cook shift is from 3:30 to 5:30, and the servers and cleaners and relationship builders, they come in about 5:15 and work till about 7. Natalie Floyd, the volunteer coordinator for the kitchen, is 870-799-4712. And so if you'd like to volunteer at our kitchen, that would be great. We have a minimum of age 16 to cook in the kitchen. We don't really have a minimum for the dining room, but people just need to be aware that we don't discriminate against anyone, and it's their responsibility to keep an eye on their kids at all times. And so while they are, and lots of kids come there too to eat. So, I mean, it's not like they will be the only kids at all. So those are definitely some ways to get a hold of us. And yeah, so I can always use, we have a free swap table, and I'm glad I'm doing this so that the community can hear it. It also goes back a bit to the miry clay about not being all the way clean. The free swap table was set up to provide clothes and household goods to people that don't have it. And it just kind of organically came about. And I try not to stifle too much things that the Lord organically has going. And so I have had several complaints that it's a bit messy over here. It looks like somebody's closet or something like that. And so my encouragement, if you are a believer, and I totally get it would be nice if it was kept up nicer, but it will require people to be here all the time for that to happen. And so if you are one of those people that are having a hard time with it, then I would highly encourage you just to give us an hour a week. You don't have to ask any of us. You don't have to talk to us. Just show up and fold clothes or hang clothes and talk to the people that come. And then they are already coming. You already have them. The Lord already has them conditioned to come to one place. So if it means saving a life and getting them to heaven, then I'm willing to have a messy closet in front of my building. And I just need people to show up for an hour a week and hang up clothes and talk to people. So with that, I would like to really encourage my midnight missionaries to show up, because we got lots of people that come here after dark to look for clothes. And these are the kinds of people that will not come if we have a building that we do clothes out of, that you have to come to a window and say, do you have size medium? I need pants and shoes. That these are the people that won't come to that. These are the people that won't come in to get food. We leave food out on that table as well every night. And so I just want to encourage people, instead of fussing about it, just show up and give an hour, and you will see that God will change your mind, and he will change your heart, and hopefully he will change somebody else's heart as well that you touch while you're here hanging up clothes.
Yeah, that's good.
So,
Autumn, what I want to do, I want to get some information from you after we get off the podcast, your Facebook information and maybe your whatever you want to give out, and I'll put it in the description of this video, so people, when they get to the video on YouTube, if we share it, people can see it. And if they want to connect with you and your ministry, they'll know how to do that. It'll be pretty easy for them.
Awesome.
And I just want to say thank you for your time today. I really, it's really moving me, in my heart, what you're talking about, and some of your story about, especially about your husband and his passing. It's very powerful. And I just pray the best for you and your ministry.
Thank
And
you so much.
sounds like things
That's
are going
actually
right.
the number one request is just
Yeah.
prayer. Prayer is the number one request that we have for help.
Yeah. Amen. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you around town.
Thank you so much for having me.